This is Larry Jordan, the host of the Digital Production Buzz. The following interview is an excerpt from a recent program. To hear the entire program, visit digitalproductionbuzz.com. Seth Worley is the resident filmmaker at visual effects software Red Giant and the director and writer of short films, branded content, and commercials for clients like J.J. Abrams, Bad Robot Productions, Leo Burnett, Steve Taylor, The Perfect Foil, and more. He lives and works in Nashville, Tennessee. Hello, Seth. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's always a delight having you. I mean, the stuff that you do is incredible, and I want to steal all your secrets so I can do it myself. So thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, man. Thanks, Larry.
When did you first realize you wanted to be a filmmaker?
How far back do you want me to go?
How far back is the answer?
1993, Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. I took every family member I had one at a time so I could see it as many times as possible. And it worked. And I found that I was watching the person I brought way more often than I was watching the movie. And so kind of taking credit for their entertainment experience. And like, aren't you grateful that I brought you Jurassic Park? And it's kind of that feeling I've been chasing ever since.
Well, I was just thinking, I love watching the reaction of audiences to stuff that I create and see when they fall asleep and when they're getting excited about it. So I can understand why that triggers, because you're responsible for that emotional response. Even if Steven Spielberg created the movie, you're the reason they're sitting there watching the movie, so you get credit for that.
Absolutely. It's almost a responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, because if they hate the movie, it's your fault.
It's all on you. It's all on you. Yeah.
What was the first film you made, and who saw it?
Oh, wow. I like to think there are several first films. Like there was one I made in 7th grade using those Taco Bell eyeball straws that they released as this marketing thing called Eyes the Invasion, and no one saw that except my parents and my brothers. And then in high school, I made a film called Try Hard that was exactly what it sounds like. It was a parody of Die Hard that all my friends saw. But the real thing for me was when I started being allowed to make videos for my youth group at church, and simultaneously for my TV production class in high school. Because at school we had a cable access channel. We were required to make programming for this cable access channel, and our teacher took it very seriously. And then the youth group, I had to make this weekly narrative content because I offered to do it. And had to stick to it, and every night it would play for this audience. And having an audience really helped me learn the dangers of self-indulgence very quickly and very early on. That just because it's entertaining to you doesn't mean it's entertaining to other people. And all the secrets of keeping people's attention. And unfortunately, every job I've had since, it's been making stuff for something that has a built-in audience already, whether it be the software company I'm at right now that has a built-in customer base already, and one that we build through our films, or before this job when I worked doing convention and conference programming. These people paid to be at conferences already, and they were forced to sit and watch my videos, so I didn't have to go find the audience. And having that audience is the biggest education possible for me.
What made it so why is it an education? Go into that in just a little bit of detail. What do you learn from watching the audience?
I mean, you learn what's working and what's not. Just like you said, if people aren't enjoying the movie, it's your fault. And so you learn from just, sitting in the crowd or sitting behind the stage and seeing when people are laughing, hearing when people are laughing, hearing when they're not laughing. You hear the gasps. You just feel it in the room when people are getting it and when they're not. And the more you can do that, the better you get. I believe, because so many people can make things in a bubble and be convinced that what they're doing is great and never grow because they never have to experience the horrible feeling of making something that doesn't work and having people respond to that. You know what I mean?
Well, that gets to an interesting point. A lot of filmmakers, especially for short films, are using YouTube for distribution. And I say nothing bad about YouTube, but you don't get any audience feedback. So it's like you're broadcasting and nobody's responding. How can you learn from a situation like that?
That's something I'm learning because, my job at Red Giant, I work from home ultimately. You know, I have worked with a crew and work shooting things, but you know, Aaron Rabinowitz, who is the head of marketing at Red Giant and my executive producer on all my films. He he works in New York City. Most of Portland is based out of most of Red Giant's based out of Portland. So I work remotely, and I experience that every day. It's that feeling of you send it out there, and you either get positive responses back or you get indifference, and it's very hard. It's very hard to learn that way. So I don't actually have a clear answer to that. I think you can kind of you can find sometimes when something's not working based on people will type super negative comments on YouTube, and you'll have to kind of figure out what is it they didn't like here behind all their profanity. Like, what is it that's really, you know, going on? But you know, I try just to show it to people in person as often as possible, because people can lie to you in an email, and they can lie to you in comments, and they can lie to you even after they're done watching. They can turn and lie to your face. But when they're watching it, they can't lie with how they're reacting, just the look in their eyes. And so I try to show stuff to people in person and weirdly, creepily stare at them as much as possible while they watch it.
One of the things I want to talk for a minute about one of the films you created, which is Spy versus Guy, which is on your website. By the way, your website is sethworley.com. You've also got films on redgiant.com, but I went to Seth Worley. And for people that haven't had a chance, you've got a number of your short films posted. And I was watching Spy versus Guy, and it starts out as this classic thriller at night. Rainy streets, Washington. How can you not love a scene that starts like that? And all of a sudden, about halfway through, the Keystone Cops break out, and you've got guys in ZZ Top beards waving homeless signs, and all of a sudden, the pizza guy is in dire straits of being chased because he's got a quarter in his pocket. How do you balance drama versus comedy, and how do you make that transition and have the audience still stay with you when you're going from a serious political thriller to Roadrunner?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you implying that I've been successful in that. For me, I always approach it seriously. You know, on Plot Device, which is my first film with Red Giant, my brother Ben scores all of my films and acts in the majority of them as well. And I remember he turned in music for one scene from Plot Device. It was the 80s action buddy cop sequence. And he had this theme that just felt totally wrong. I said, buddy, like, what? He said, oh, well, this is funny. I said, no. Your job doing the music is not to be funny. Like, the only like it's actually none of our jobs to be funny. We have to treat this like we really think it's Die Hard. Like, we have to score this thing like it's completely a real action film, and the comedy will happen on its own. And that's kind of been my approach all along. Is, you know, Spy versus Guy really is dangerous, because I catch myself in the middle of production realizing, oh, I get bummed. I'm like, oh, I'm not really making a 1970s conspiracy thriller. Like, I'm making a comedy ultimately, but I have to always operate under the idea that I'm really making a serious film within that genre, because the jokes have been written. The jokes are going to be acted out. They're going to happen. They're situation based jokes, and if we play them like jokes, then they'll fall flat. But if we play them like real moments, real cinematic moments, then I think that's when they have the most impact.
But one of the things that I was struck by is the very limited amount of dialogue. Your jokes are visual jokes. It's the contrast of the T-shirt pizza guy with the homeless veteran with the beard that goes down to his belt. And I mean, it's how are you setting that up so it's funny and yet treating it seriously? That strikes me as a very fine line to walk.
It is a fine line to walk. I think we try to just we try to commit. Well, the best way to answer that, on Spy versus Guy, for example, I know that we looked at the genre that we were playing in, which was, you know, that 1970s conspiracy. You know, the Day of the Jackal was the biggest reference for me on that film. And there's so in that genre, they use zoom lenses like a kid who just got a zoom lens for Christmas. Like, it's ridiculous, and it's such a kitschy thing to do nowadays. You don't see it very often. Like, people actually move the camera nowadays, but back then they would just zoom nonstop, and so we did that a lot. And in our production design, we always try to focus on what feels real and what's serious. And well, like I said, what's often it looks real is the funniest. And you know, so I don't mean I don't know how to explain it. I think it's just we're all goofy people trying to make serious things, and I think I know that if we there's maybe this fear that if we actually tried to make something serious one day, it would just be ridiculous and stupid and funny. People would think it was a comedy. So maybe I'm just playing on that to our strengths.
In other words, when you're serious, you're still funny.
Yeah, you can't help it.
Well, one of the other things I was wondering about is so many of your videos have had massive views on YouTube. They've been really successful. Do you plan a video to go viral? Do you plan for something to make a trip wires on YouTube and have it go through the roof?
Oh man, you want it to. I mean, nobody makes something and is hoping that, 15 people see it. Like, you make something, you want millions of people to see it. And it's just, there's strategies to it. There's all kinds of ways to go about it. But honestly, I would even tell you that if it's good, it'll find an audience, but sometimes it just doesn't. One of my favorite shorts we did was a short called Form 17 we made to promote Pluralize. And that was a very dialogue heavy, but very character driven short that I'm still to this day very proud of. And it did not find a major audience base. I think it has everything to do with luck. It's just time of day, time of the year that you release it. What else is out there? I mean, we released our last film, Old New, narrated by Patton Oswalt. We had Patton Oswalt. We thought we were going to get millions of views. And we're still struggling toward that $1 million thing because I think for a lot of reasons, one of them being a Power Rangers related short film was released like 2 days after they got millions of views. And, it's like when something like that's out there, it immediately takes up attention, and I understandably so. So I think it's just luck.
Caesar, who's on our live chat, is agreeing with you in terms of playing it straight. He says that's exactly what the director of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter said. They had to play it straight, he writes. If they made jokes, it wasn't going to work. Although perhaps that movie wasn't meant to be funny. So you never know these sort of things.
That's a great example.
Put your Red Giant hat on. I know you're the resident filmmaker for Red Giant.
Yes, sir.
When you're planning a film, when do you start to work in effects? And do you design a film for a specific effect? Because clearly Red Giant wants you to showcase what you can do with their products. How much of your filmmaking is driven by the effects that you've got access to?
Our best films are always the ones that start with the product. So, for example, on Old New, our last short was we had this new Magic Bullet suite was going to have a considerable upgrade. And one of the main features was a new plugin called Magic Bullet Film, which emulated old film stocks, real film stocks. Mm-hmm. And our conversation started with that. It was, okay, we have a plugin that it's technology that we've created to simulate old technology. What are the themes inherent in this? And so we start with, okay, what visually could we do here? And if there's nothing overtly visual to do, is there something thematic related to this that we could do? Then tie the visuals back in. And through those conversations, we came up with this idea of a guy obsessed with brand new things. And then he discovers that old things are actually great. And he old whiskey and old reclaimed wood and old records are fantastic. And then he takes it too far and he's like, old bananas are okay. And old plumbing is nice. And then he takes it so far that he's living in a cave with a skeleton and he has no outside, communication with the outside world because he's taken things so antiquated. And we just thought that's great. It's a great way to play up this, cultural idea that pictures don't look finished until they look worse and older, and that old things are better than new things. And through that process, we were able to actually visually show this by having the look of the film become more older and older and go into these older film stocks as it goes on, showcasing the variety of looks that Magic Bullet Film can accomplish. So yeah, the best ones always start with the product. The worst ones are the ones where I have a cool idea and we just find the closest possible product we can plug it in with and go with it.
Well, you got your start with effects with little eyeballs on sticks.
Little eyeballs on sticks.
What it boggles the imagination right there. What is it about effects that fascinates you?
I love the quote from John Lasseter, where he said that art challenges the technology and technology inspires the art. My favorite director is probably Robert Zemeckis. I grew up the most influenced by his work, specifically Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Forrest Gump. I mean, those movies prove that like the visual effects are not all about robots and dinosaurs and you know the big spectacle. It's even about just the spectacle story itself. It's just a problem solving thing. Visual effects are such a creative form that involves such a interesting amount of problem solving. Man, I have a much more romantic answer that I totally forgot. But it's problem solving, and it's the idea of creating an illusion for people and showing people something that they can't see in every day or that they may not be expecting.
But it seems to me, you couldn't pick a better film to be a fan of than Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That film, you don't see a single effect. The rabbit is real. Jessica is real. And it's, of course, they're interacting with Bob Hoskins. And what to me is the effects became invisible. You couldn't tell the story without the effect. But the effect is not something you pay attention to. It's, of course, the curtains move when a rabbit moves past it. You don't even notice it, as opposed to a lot of things where how big you can blow it up or how big an explosion you have sort of gets in the way of the story. They can't tell the story without the effect. It seems to me that you've got something just like that in mind.
My favorite, to me, I think the thing that made me like solidified the magic of making movies to me was the making of Roger Rabbit, the scene where the weasels come into Eddie Valiant's office and they're carrying around live action guns, and they're animated weasels carrying live action guns, and with their raw footage is just an Invisible Man movie. It's these floating guns walking around that are being hung by strings, and then Bob Hoskins has stiff handcuffs on his hand to where Roger's hand can be animated into it, and he's controlling it. And he's got that machine that's under the sink that he pulls up and it spits the water out, and they paint Roger over it. I mean, as a kid, I remember seeing that and thinking, grown-ups do this for a living? Like, this is awesome. And it's those subtle details that are it's just them having fun. They could just simply throw in some animated characters, not simply, obviously, but you can throw in animated characters holding animated weapons. But I love that extra challenge of let's make this a little bit harder. Let's put live action guns in there. And the other thing is Bob Hoskins' performance. I think some of my favorite actors are actors who you see work with visual effects really well because they're just good at pretending. And not only that, but they enjoy doing it. And they take it totally seriously. Patrick Stewart is one of them. Who comes to mind. But Bob Hoskins and Roger Rabbit is one of the best live-action visual effects performances in film history to me.
Well,
he sells that movie.
It was back to your tennis balls again. They were holding tennis balls that illustrated where Roger Rabbit was, and Bob was acting to a tennis ball and made it completely believable.
Exactly. And he also gets what a lot of people can't. I don't know how he did it. He got eye line right. And that if you have a character that's supposed to be here but they're not, you pretend to look at them, you're focusing on something beyond that. You can't focus at nothing. I don't know how he does it. In that movie, he is focusing at that space, even when there's nothing there. It's exceptional. I could talk for about 2 hours about Bob Hoskins' eye line in Roger Rabbit.
Which gives you an idea that you have got to get a life. I think that's the big risk.
I really do. Look, I don't leave this room. My kids haven't seen me in months. I've just been finishing films.
As you look at, you're not yet 60, but as you look back over the last several years of filmmaking, what's the number one lesson that you've learned?
Wow. That's a question I wish I had read ahead of the show. To say it one more time,
As you look back on the films that you've made, and each film evolves, improves on the one before it, what's the big takeaway? What's the big lesson you've learned about filmmaking?
Each film I've made. Have fun. Challenge yourself. I've learned that when you're not, the best projects are the ones that I have no guarantee they're going to work. And the ones that have been the least fulfilling, that I've learned the least and accomplished the least, are the ones that I know they're going to work from the beginning. And so I think it's the biggest thing I constantly learn, is just constantly challenge yourself, constantly try new things, work with new people, do things that scare you, and keep your crew safe in the process.
If you'd have rehearsed that answer, it wouldn't have been as good, by the way. Seth, where can people go on the web to learn more about you and your products and films?
You can see all my Red Giant films at redgiant.com/films. There's also tutorials I do there. And you can see my other projects, like my commercials and such, at sethworley.com.
And the Seth Worley himself, that's SETHWORLEY, sethworley.com.
Yes,
Seth, it's always a delight chatting with you. Thanks so much for sharing your time today.
Thanks, Larry. It's a blast.
Take care.